So, my friends, welcome to another episode. I'm here with a legend, with a living legend, for the man that created the myth itself. Whether he likes to recognize it or not, here we have Mr. Bob Budiansky. Bob, please introduce yourself. It is truly an honor to have you here in the channel.
Well, thank you for saying that. It's nice to meet you, Jack. It's nice to be here.
It is really great to have you here. Your work on the Transformers comics and the Transformers franchise as a whole is legendary. You did for Transformers what Stan Lee did for Marvel Comics. You did a lot for this franchise, and we will talk about that. And not only Transformers, but a lot of your other projects, because I read a lot of your comics, and wow, they blew my mind. Sleepwalker, for example, it is a very great concept that I love you, but we'll get to that. Please introduce yourself to the audience. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, that's a big question. Well, okay. So as your audience already knows, my name is Bob Budiansky. I worked for Marvel Comics for approximately a little short of 20 years, from 1976 to 1996. During that time, I was an artist, I was a writer, I was an editor. I even colored a few comic books. So I wore many hats. I tried different, I had many opportunities to learn and try different aspects of creating comic books. And I enjoyed them all. And I did the best I could when given the opportunity. And after 1996, I worked for Scholastic, which is a children's publishing company. And then and since about 2006, I've been doing freelance work and working as the recreation director in the town that I live in. So I've tried a lot of different things. And meanwhile, while I'm doing the recreation director job, I also do a lot of art commissions. Not a lot, but I do some art commissions based on the work I used to do for Marvel Comics.
I've seen a lot of your art commissions, actually ghostwriter mainly, and they are amazing. I really love your art style. It really captures the essence of the characters. And let's talk about. I had questions like written, but let's talk about that. What is your inspiration in the art form? Who inspired you? What made you like come to that coloring style, to that art style of yours?
I suppose it started when I was very young, because I guess I started drawing when I was about 5 years old. I have two older brothers. They had comic books. I looked at their comics. I got excited by them. A few years later, I was able to start buying my own comic books and start my own collection. I didn't realize it was going to be a collection at the time. They were just comics, but I still have them. I still have my first comic book that I ever bought. I still have it. Not in good shape, but I still have it. By the way, for you and your fans, it's Justice League of America #6. The Wheel of Misfortune. That's the title. The Wheel of Misfortune. A great issue. Anyway, so as I got more into comics and as I got older and realized there were different artists with different styles that brought their own point of view to drawing comic books, I just became more and more into the idea of becoming an artist. I practiced a lot, and that's what I wanted to be when I grew up. That's what I decided. So when you say like who influenced me, well, when I was a kid, mostly DC artists, specifically Gil Kane, who I had the honor of working with decades later as a Marvel editor. He worked for me. Carmine Infantino, Mike Sikowski, Joe Kubert. And then I got a little older. I started buying Marvel comics, and I got exposed to people like Jack Kirby and John Romita. And certainly Jack Kirby came at it from a completely different point of view than what I had experienced reading DC comics and the artists of that generation. And then I kind of dropped out of comics. I got to high school, got involved in different hobbies or different pursuits or whatever, and stopped reading comics altogether. And then when I got to college, a friend of mine said, "Hey, you got to look at this." And I started looking at Conan. I didn't know what Conan was. I didn't know, that it was based on these old pulp magazine stories that got turned into paperbacks and so on. But I looked at the art by Barry Windsor Smith and John Buscema, neither who I was ever exposed to up until that point, and I was just blown away at this whole other angle. So if I had to look back and say, who my influences were, probably ultimately John Buscema was my biggest influence, because he's just a master of draftsmanship, of storytelling. He can, when he was at his peak, he could do anything. And Marvel knew it, which is why they so overused him back in the 70s and 80s, trying to get him to draw just about everything, or at least the covers to almost everything. And anyway, so he was a huge influence. But all those other guys all entered into my creative bloodstream and influenced me in one way or another.
That's great. They are great artists, actually. You're right. I especially love Jack Kirby's art. He's fantastic, and those are like very big names, and it is. I assume it was kind of exciting for you to be the boss of your childhood icon. It was. I assume that.
Well, actually, some of those. I mean, John Buscema did work for me. Stan Lee worked for me. But I was an editor for a number of years, so like different people who I grew up reading or looking at their artwork wind up working for me. But you got to treat them with ultimate respect, because they're so talented and they had so many achievements in that field. On the other hand, you get to know them as human beings. They're no longer these people that you think are on some heavenly pedestal somewhere drawing their books. They're just real people, and you just learn to deal with them like real people. So, but it was a pleasure working with all of these guys.
I get it. Now, let's say that I'm feeling like the same feeling that I'm getting to know you like as a person, and this is like very great. And speaking of not getting to know you as a person, like, what can you tell us about your history, where you come from, what are your passions, what are your likes, dislikes, and all of that? Let us get to know the man behind the myths and the legends and the stories.
I have to tell you, Jack, usually these interviews are about my work, not about everything behind me. I have to start thinking. I don't have prepared answers like I do for everything else. Well, okay, I grew up in New York City. Specifically, I grew up in the Bronx. And I was a shy kid. I liked sports, but I wasn't particularly athletic. But I spent a lot of time drawing. That was my hobby. And but then I got into science. I was actually went to a specialized high school for science, Bronx High School of Science, and I decided as I got older that becoming a comic book artist was probably an unrealistic goal. It just seemed like so out of reach. So I decided when I went to college, I'd become a civil engineering major. So I actually have a bachelor's of science degree in civil engineering. And I continued for 1 year for a master's degree in transportation engineering. And then I dropped out of grad school to work for Marvel Comics.
That seems like a very good choice looking back.
At the time, it seemed like the right thing to do. I don't know. I'll never know what my life might have been like otherwise. But it seemed like all the time I was in college, I worked for the college newspaper as an illustrator, and eventually I became the graphic arts editor. So I was in charge of all of the illustrations in the college newspaper for a couple of years. And so I always kept my hand in drawing, even though I thought, I'm going to make a living as a civil engineer somewhere. But anyway, while I was in college, a friend of mine from my college got a job at Marvel, and he invited me down to visit the office. And he said, "Bring your portfolio, show the art director." And the art director at the time was Marie Severin, extremely talented artist. And she looked at my art samples. I was there over one of the holiday vacations. She looked at my samples and said, basically, "You should find another career." So a few months later, maybe about 5 or 6 months later, my friend decided to leave his job at Marvel. He was an editorial assistant, which is like the lowest of the low among the editorial staff. And he said, "Bob, I'm leaving my job. Do you want to interview for my job?" So I said, "Sure, why not?" And I interviewed for his job over the telephone. I didn't even meet face to face with my future boss. And I got the job. So I dropped out. And my first boss the person I spoke to on the telephone was Larry Lieber, who was Stanley's brother.
Whoa.
So that was my first boss.
A big call and a big first boss, actually.
Yeah.
That sounds great. And I can see that we have a little bit of parallel because I'm studying English teaching, actually. But my dream has always been like to be a writer. So for me, the dream is like a little high now, but let's see what life has planned for me.
Yeah.
Well, you answered like my second question. What got you into comic books was like my second reading question, and what inspired you to enter into the comic book industry. That was so. I think we can skip that. And as far as I know, you started your comic book career by doing pinups. What was your job like? What was about? Tell us a little bit about your first job in Marvel. I'm not sure if it was the pinups, but tell us about your first job at
That's actually a bit of a gray area. Somebody showed me recently a pinup that I did do for the Marvel fan magazine, Foom. I had forgotten I did it. I think I did it before I started working there. I think I did, while I was still in college, but I don't know. My first job really was working as Larry Lieber's editorial assistant in the Marvel British department. So the Marvel British department at that time, we took already printed Marvel comics from the last 5 or 10 years or whatever, and we reprinted them for the British market. And the British market had a different selling plan than the American market. The American market comics sold usually like once a month. British market, they were weekly. Every week, a comic book in a series came out. So what we did for the British comics is we took a 20-page American story, which was typically the size approximately of most of the American books back then, and we would cut it in half. So we might have 10-page Spider-Man story in the first half and a 10-page backup Planet of the Apes story or whatever in the second half of the British book. And so we chop up all of these stories into halves, and then we would need a new splash page. A splash page, as you might know, is the first page of a story. Usually it's a full page, a full page of art. It's not with panels or anything like that. So we would need a new splash page for the second half of the book, which we've cut up in half, and then we would find we would hire artists, usually guys who were trying to break into the business, like people who were unknown at the time, just trying to break in. We would hire these young artists to do their best imitating Gene Colan or John Buscema or Don Heck or whoever drew that book. Okay, now you have to do an Iron Man splash in the style of Don Heck, or you have to do a Tomb of Dracula splash in the style of Gene Colan or whatever. Anyway, it was a good training ground for a lot of artists, and some of them became big names. Among them, John Romita Jr., Frank Miller, I think, did a couple of splashes for us, Michael Golden. Anyway, as the editorial assistant, when my friend told me to interview for the job, he said, "Don't tell Larry that you want to be an artist." He says, all he wants you to do is help him, get all the books together, traffic them back and forth between all the different people who have to handle them. If he knows you want to be an artist, he knows you want to quit, and he won't hire you if he knows that you're going to quit soon. So, I'll quit to be an artist. That's the theory. So anyway, I kept it quiet when I was interviewing, but as soon as I got on staff, I made it clear to Larry that, I have some art skills. And so I got involved in doing all these sketches for all the other artists doing all these splash pages and some of the covers as well. And then eventually I did some of the splash pages. I did a lot of them. I did a few covers. So I got a lot of art. I did some background. I think the only book that we created brand new in the British department was Captain Britain. So for a while I was doing background artwork for Ron Wilson, who was the regular artist for a while on Captain Britain. And so anyway, I got all sorts of great experience working there. Only worked there for about a year until I did exactly what it seemed like I was going to do, which is I quit to become a freelance artist for a while. But anyway, it was wonderful working in the British department, and it was a good learning experience. That's what I started doing before I went freelance.
It seems like a really great experience, actually. Like you wanted to keep like a low profile before like revealing yourself as your true intentions per se. For example, that was your mindset back at the time. Like
Yeah.
keep a low profile.
Well, it's good training ground. Like most artists don't have the opportunity of training on the job. You know, so here exactly, it's low profile. Nobody cared about British reprints. So if you got some guy who barely knew how to draw one of these splash pages, yeah, you know, he's learning. Nobody's caring. No, it's not going to affect the sales one way or the other. He's not the regular artist in the book. So it was a really great training ground. Oh, one other thing I meant to get back to, which is, so like all other departments at Marvel, we had an art director who helped us and oversaw what we did. The art director was Marie Severin, the one who rejected me 6 months earlier. So once I got on staff and I became apparent that I was trying to improve my art skills, Marie was the art director I worked with, and I'm sure she had no memory of what she had told me months earlier about finding another career. And she could not have been nicer. She was the best teacher, the best art teacher I had ever in my life. She was great. So I just want to bring it back to, like, Marie's I mean, she's no longer with us, but she was a wonderful person and a tremendous teacher and so generous with her time. Can't say enough about her.
That's amazing to know. That those are like very great experiences to share with me. I'm so glad that I can do this. It is really amazing. What got you into Ghostwriter? What got you into drawing Ghostwriter?
Okay, well, this is also kind of a weird story. All right, so strangely enough, Big Ben. You know what Big Ben is? The clock in London.
The clock in London, really?
I'll explain. So, as I said, I was doing so Ron Wilson was known at the time. He was a young, really dynamic artist, you know, did great muscular superhero guys punching each other. He was great at fight scenes. Didn't care much about doing backgrounds. So we had this comic book, Captain Britain, which took place in England. I'd never been to England. This was before we had Google. You couldn't just pull pictures off the internet and copy them. So we went out. I think maybe I did, or I don't know who did. We got some books, some tour books of London and other places. And my job as the background artist was to make the backgrounds look like England or like London. So I remember there's one cover in particular where Captain Britain's fighting somebody, and there's this huge picture of Big Ben in the background, which I drew, and Piccadilly Circus and other locations around London. I drew all that stuff. So I had a reputation. I developed a reputation for drawing all these backgrounds in great detail. What does that have to do with Ghostwriter? Okay, so around issue, I think it was 33, Ghostwriter, strangely enough, fought aliens coming off of a spaceship. So if you know anything about Ghostwriter, his operating arena where he was known to be busy was always involving the supernatural and demons and all bizarre creatures, right? But this was the time of Star Wars and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, right? So for whatever reason, the writer, the editor, I don't know, I wasn't involved in that part of it, decided they wanted to feature a big spaceship on the cover where these aliens are coming off the spaceship and attacking Ghostwriter. And the artist, the regular artist of Ghostwriter at that time, Don Perlin, a generation older than me, I guess his concept of what spaceships looked like were from the 1950s, which were like guided missiles or flying saucers or something. So the editor of Ghostwriter knew me from my work in Captain Britain, said, "Bob, you're good at drawing detailed backgrounds. Draw us a spaceship that looks like it's from Star Wars or Close Encounters." And I drew this big, spaceship with all these doodads, all these things sticking out of it, and all this detail, and they loved it, And so I had this Ghostwriter cover, my first Ghostwriter cover, and that's exactly what the editor wanted. And Don went and changed all the spaceships on the interior of the book to match what I did on the cover. And Don was good that way. We worked later on Transformers together. Very similar things happened. And as a result of that one cover, I became the regular Ghostwriter cover artist for the next couple of years, except I missed out of about 25 or 30 issues, I missed maybe, more like 30 issues, I think. I missed maybe half a dozen covers Otherwise, I did all the covers, which is very odd for a young artist like me who wasn't drawing a regular book ever to be the regular cover artist for a monthly book. So that's how I got involved with ghostwriting. And then eventually, the editor decided to make a change on the direction of the book, brought in a new writer, brought in me as a new artist, and I took over drawing the entire book with issue 68.
So you started as a cover artist for ghostwriter based on what you did with London imagery, and then they asked you to be the regular artist for the ghostwriter comics. So that's a really interesting story. I would never put it together for myself.
You need to have like a top-notch detective. If I wasn't here to tell you the story, to figure out how did he become the ghostwriter artist. It wasn't like somebody just said, "Oh, come." It was like this long evolution of rather bizarre connections between this and this and this. And anyway, I love drawing ghostwriter. And the only problem with drawing ghostwriter is, unfortunately, he always has that motorcycle with him. And the motorcycle takes a while to draw. It's a lot of work. While we're talking about it, currently I'm in the middle of 2 ghostwriter commissions. So I'll share. Here's one. Whoops. Okay, now, just to be clear, this is a cover recreation. Okay, the original artist on this is Gil Kane. So this is my version of his cover. So all credit to Gil Kane, and Steve Lealow was the inker. So credit to Steve Lealow as well. This one's almost done. And here, this is the pencils of another cover recreation, which is my last issue of Ghostwriter before it got canceled. So that's just the pencil version.
That's some great artwork. I adore it. I really like the style when there are a lot of shadows and contrast between lights and the dark elements of the draw, and that is really, really amazing. I love how you capture the essence of the character. It's amazing. I'm blown away. That looks very great, and I would love to see the other one finished.
I'd love to see it too. I'm sure my client would love to see it too. I'm pretty slow.
I understand you. I like to draw a little bit, and I have draws that I never touch again for years. So I'm happy that they are not paying me to draw those. Now,
this is what I drew today.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Now, the reason I drew this is because, like I said, I'm the recreation director for my town. We're planning a Halloween event. So this is for a poster. This will be part of a Halloween poster that I'll put out around the town. And I just needed to have a background of a haunted forest. So
a very Halloweeny town, a very Halloweeny graveyard.
So my experience on Ghostwriter came in handy drawing those scary looking trees, all these years later.
Who knew? Again, the strange connections and the strange things that is very interesting when you see it in a retrospective. So again, keeping with in the theme of the obscure, of the dark characters, you are known for Ghostwriter, but you also developed an amazing character that I personally love. I read a lot of his comics, Sleepwalker. Sleepwalker is a very great concept. I'm so happy because I don't have the chance to get in touch with the writer who writes a character that I really, really love. But Sleepwalker is a very interesting, very great concept. What was the mindset? How did you come to the character? How did you create it?
Well, the idea of Sleepwalker began at an editorial meeting probably around 1985, which was about 5 years before I actually came out with the book, before Marvel actually published the book. So, like I said, I was an editor. I was a full editor at Marvel for 13 years, and so the first Jim Shooter, who was the editor-in-chief at the time, he hired me on staff around 1983, and we'd have I think almost weekly editorial meetings where Jim would talk about whatever was on his mind that week about some aspect of creating comic books. And I remember well, what happened was at one of these meetings, he talked about Superman. Now, I don't know how much you know about Jim Shooter, but Jim Shooter started writing comics when he was 13 years old. He was writing Legion of Superheroes and Superboy for DC Comics, starting when he was 13.
Wow, I didn't know that. I know who Jim Shooter is, but I didn't know that. Didn't know that.
I mean, I wasn't around. You know, I was just a kid reading his comics probably back then. But you know, he sent in some submissions to DC, and they didn't know how young he was, and you know, we got somebody's attention, and they started giving him work, and then he turned out to be this kid, you know, this 13-year-old kid. Anyway, but he had obviously my point is he had a lot of experience with Superman because he was writing these characters, and so he said at this particular meeting, he said, if Superman actually existed in our world, rather than everybody embracing him as this hero, because that's how Superman was represented back then, up until more recently, perhaps. Rather than everybody just accepting him as this do-gooder hero who's, you know, nobody should fear, he's just this wonderful person. Actually, all the nations of the earth would get together and say, what can we do to stop this alien who could like destroy us? You know, they would all be united by fear of Superman, even if Superman was still a good person. And that triggered an idea in my head. Yeah, why don't we have a character who's like the anti-Superman? He's still good, but people don't accept him. You know, it just so happens that Superman was created to look like the all-American hero, you know, the all-American stereotype hero. You know, big, strong, you know, just, you know, handsome face, all the usual stereotypical aspects. What if the character who is a hero looks like a bug-eyed monster? How would people react to him then? And that was the genesis of Sleep. That's where the idea came from. From that one comment, just triggered that idea in my head. So I fashioned this character around that idea.
That's great, and all of the other aspects of the comic, I really like that aspect that he's not necessarily like, you see him, and yeah, you see like a very big bad ghost rider creature, like it could be bad, but he's innocent. He's a really innocent and really well-spirited, a really good guy, and he's just like trying to understand the things and all the things that happen around him. But we also have the Rick Sheridan, the character. I really want to emphasize how much I like that in comic books we always have like teenage superheroes, but they all go or to college or to school, high school or school, and in college they study like regular majors for a comic book, nothing like too spectacular. They study to be lawyers or to be scientists, things like that. You made Rick a filmmaker, that he wanted to be like a filmmaker. That's a really odd and interesting like decision. What made you like think that would be like his job?
I wanted Rick to have an interesting life outside of just being stuck with this alien in his head. So, you know, if he was an accounting major, how interesting. Sorry, I hope I'm not offending any accountants out there, but you know, as a student, how interesting could that be? But if he was a film major, he could do things that involved him getting out of the normal, everyday, mundane routine. You know, he's making these silly movies. I mean, initially I had him making this sci-fi movie with his friends in the first couple of issues, and you know, so I could have fun with it, and I could make him like stress out over I'm in the middle of collaborating with my friends, yet I haven't slept in 4 days, you know, and I can't, you know, that sort of thing, you know. So I mean, I don't think that those ideas are original in the sense that Peter Parker as Spider-Man had the same issues. I mean, he was a more mainstream high school student initially, you know, just very plain vanilla high school student, but Spider-Man completely destroyed his civilian life in all sorts of ways. You know, he was always being pulled away from going on a date or taking care of Aunt May, or you know, keeping his job at the Daily Bugle or whatever. You know, there was always something interfering with. He was a hero before anything else, and so I tried to bring some of that idea over to Rick, that he wanted to be a filmmaker. He wanted to do all this fun, imaginative, creative stuff with his friends, and Sleepwalker became a big obstacle to him succeeding.
I actually like the part now that we're talking about Spider-Man, that Sleepwalker prevents Spider-Man in one of the issues to go to his high school or to classes, to attend to his lessons. It's like, oh no, I'm gonna lose this class, and all because of that guy, and he only brought me problems. I really don't like this guy, but he gets used to it, and it is a very easy character to love. Both of them are very easy characters to love because I really adore that work. I was blown away when I was reading like the concept, the page, the designs, all of that. You made the design of the Sleepwalker, or it was like another artist who came with the idea, or tell us a little bit more about how he looks like.
I did the entire design. I designed him. I designed Rick. I designed Alyssa. I designed 8 Ball. After that, I let Brett Blevins, the artist who drew the initial 15 or so issues, let him design characters that I developed further along. But yeah, I have my original sketches somewhere. I definitely did the design. Again, I was just going for the bug-eyed monster look. I was going for like, well, he has to be humanoid. We have to be able to relate to him. He can't look like some kind of a octopus creature. He can't look completely grotesque. However, even being a humanoid, you can make somebody grotesque. So I made him a green-skinned, noseless, bug eyes. And it was one issue where I actually showed his eyes, what's the word? Like bug eyes mean like actual insects have those cellular structures in their eyes. They don't see things in one point of view. They see things in multiple points of view. So I just went with it. I wanted to make him very unlike us, yet like us enough that we could relate to him. He is still humanoid. So that was it. That was my goal. That was why. That was what was behind my thinking while I was designing him.
You achieved your purpose, and also the powers are very interesting. I like that. And I like that Sleepwalker actually can transmutate the matter around him with his vision. That is a very original superpower, and that is great.
Well, I think I was influenced by the idea that he comes from this dream dimension, the mind state. And as as anybody who can dream knows, things in your dreams aren't the way they are in reality. Usually you dream things that are pretty identifiable, like a chair is a chair, a house is a house. But then you have like people like Salvador Dali, who do all these dreamlike paintings where things are melting, common objects like watches are melting on the canvas. And that was kind of the thinking behind, I'm going to give Sleepwalker this real surreal power where he can bend things and stretch things and make it more dreamlike that way.
Those are very great concepts. Actually, another thing that now I'm realizing is that Sleepwalker loses his powers when he flies very high, and in the dreams when everyone flies, I think we all dream when we fly. We do not fly very high. Now I get your mindset. I understand you, and it's pretty awesome. It's pretty rad if you want to say it like that. It's amazing. I think you don't give yourself the credit that you deserve, that you rightfully deserve, because
I appreciate you saying that. Sleepwalker was a good idea. I was real happy to work on it. It had its moment, but you can't, like a lot of things. If I were a prolific writer, I would have had something right after Sleepwalker to do, and I would have had something after that. But I moved in different directions, so that's okay. But now I don't know if you realize, there's a fan film that's been created of Sleepwalker.
Oh,
live action fan film with special effects, with real actors, real lighting, real wardrobe, real sound, and I have a cameo in it. And if you go to Facebook and look up Sleepwalker, you'll see a lot about it. You'll see, in fact, I have the movie poster right on my wall over here. I can't really show it to you, but it's not a laptop. That's a desktop. But I was supposed to go to the, it's a fan film, so obviously the guy who made it can't put it into commercial movie theaters and make a buck out of it. but he was going to have it premiere at a movie festival in Florida in March. I had plane tickets to fly down there and guest star and be a guest at the premiere, and that was the weekend when the lockdown began. so it all got canceled, and I don't know when it's going to happen now.
I hope they release it, and I really hope, very wishful thinking that I someday see Sleepwalker in the big screen and with all the MCU characters, because he deserves it. He really deserves it. Now,
I would be happy too. But check out on Facebook Sleepwalker, and you'll find Sleepwalker the movie. You'll see a trailer for it. You'll see all sorts of stuff about it.
I'll share the links in the description when I release this interview. Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of guys that have been in a lot of movies actually since the 80s, speaking of Transformers, many fans, including myself, consider you the father of the characters, since without you, they would have been just toys, nothing more. Just gave those toys personalities, you gave them attributes, you gave them a lot of things. And when I saw the Toys That Made Us like documentary, you said that you made them in just a weekend. 26 characters. I like to write a little bit superheroes, aliens, and I struggled to even create one with a personality, one with a catchphrase, one with a story defined. How did you manage to name 26 characters and to make them that distinguishable as they are? How did you manage?
How did I do that? Okay, well, first of all, you're giving me too much credit. Okay, I have to just state for the record, Jim Shooter, I think I have it right here actually. He wrote the treatment. He wrote the original backstory. Here it is. Amazing. It just happens to be at arm's length away. That is the original treatment for the Transformers, which I did not write.
Wow.
Okay? That's it. I did write, like you can see on this page, some things are crossed out. That is my handwriting. So at some point, Jim Shooter came back to me and says, okay, we're going to change the name of this, and we're going to change this word over here. And I just scribbled it out. So like, for instance, the Ark, which is a spaceship that brought the Transformers to Earth, originally was named, if you look closely, you can see it was originally named Anty, A-U-N-T-Y. And somebody decided, try to figure it. There it is, right above my finger, right next to my finger, Anty.
Anty, yeah. And there is the Ark.
And there's other things that were changed, like Buster Witwicky was originally Spike Witwicky, and so on. Anyway, but this is pretty much the final version of it. And so I did do a lot of creating over that one weekend, but the concept was already there. I didn't create the concept. The toys already existed. So, you know, you were referring to, you have a hard time creating even one character. Well, you have to create it from scratch. I was given the toy. I could see what the toy, you know, turned into a jet, and then turned into a robot with a big gun. And so I could get some ideas just based on what it looked like and what it could do. So I have a lot of advantages in that respect. Yeah. So and to be again more for the sake of accuracy, I actually only named 24 out of the 26. There was somebody that Jim hired before me to do the development of all the characters, and Jim didn't care for the work that was turned in, and he didn't go back to the editor and ask him to revise it. He just gave it to another person, which turned out to be me. So, but two of the names made it through, and Optimus Prime was one of them. So anyway, but yes, I was given a long weekend to develop all these characters and come up with names, and I guess I didn't have much going on at that time. I was, you know, I guess I had a lot of free time on my weekend, that particular weekend. And so I stayed home and cranked them out, you know, and, you know, I'd already been working for Marvel by that point. It was November 83. So I'd already been working at Marvel in one way or another for 7 years. So this wasn't completely new to me. Like, you know, here's what goes into making a character sound interesting and giving them a personality. I'd been exposed to this on numerous occasions, from various, whether it was a story plot that was given to me when I was editing, or some treatment that I read that somebody else wrote or something. So, experiences were all over me. They're all over the office. So I had lots of opportunity to be exposed to this sort of stuff, and frankly, I wanted to become more of a writer at that point. Because being an artist and a full-time job as an editor was nearly impossible. So when I was drawing Sleepwalker, when I was drawing Ghost Rider, I was not on staff. When I went back on staff, I had to give up. Well, Ghost Rider was already canceled, and I had some other jobs, some other art jobs. But after that, after I went back on staff, I couldn't take drawing a regular comic book anymore. I just didn't have the time. But I could write. So I was looking for opportunities, and this opportunity came along, and I took it.
That's amazing, actually, and I really love your job, the personalities. One that I really like is Prowl. Prowl is one of my favorite characters, and you wrote him like in this like serious guy. And I tend to write a lot of stories related to Transformers, and I'm really sad that not a lot of his original personality has came into to be like he's a really great character when you see it backwards, when you see it back then, and that's so cool. I really love, especially Proud for that. And nowadays the characters have names and personalities that are so iconic. Like you see that yellow horned little bug, his Bumblebee, that jet, that red jet, Starscream. We as fans and other people cannot see them in other way. And if you've ever seen the message boards and things like that, you know that fans freak out when a name does not belong to a character and things like that. So we associate those characters with those names and personalities. But when you originally saw that toy, because it was a toy, it was just a silver gun, a yellow car, what made you think that this thing right here needs to have this name and the personality?
Well, I named about 250 of them.
Oh.
So for me to, so I'm not going to go over every one of them because I don't even remember what came into my mind. A couple of them I remember though. Okay, so you mentioned two right there. You mentioned Starscream and you mentioned Bumblebee. So Starscream, now I know Starscream has somehow elevated himself above so many other similar Transformer characters of that era. But when it was presented to me, there were 3 identical Decepticon jets. The only thing that distinguished them was the way they were painted. They were painted in different colors. So I knew they were bad guys, and I knew that these robots transformed into jets. And that's pretty much all I was given. And so I decided to come up with 3 names that all did approximately the same thing. They would have something in them that related to the sky or the heavens or space.
Wow.
And the other thing that I would put in there was something disturbing, something that made you uneasy, because they're villains. So I came up with Starscream. Obviously, stars are up in the heavens. And scream is not a pleasant idea usually. Sky warp, so sky again up in the heavens, and warp, something normal gets disturbed and turned into something else. And finally, thundercracker. So again, thunder is something you associated with the sky phenomena, and cracker, in that respect, thundercracker is like something cracking and breaking, and it sounds a little bit violent. So that's all that came into my head, just to combine those 2 thoughts, the heavens and something disturbing. And those are the names I came up with. And like Starscream seems to have just taken on a completely different life of its own compared to the other 2. But that was it. He was just one of the 3. And as far as personalities, I mean, to be honest, I don't remember what I wrote for Skywarp or Thundercracker, but I know Starscream was the conniving, scheming, very smart but very dangerous number 2. And what I was thinking when I came up with Starscream, as far as his personality, was he would be this the second in command to Megatron, but he wanted to be number one. He wanted to push Megatron out of the picture. And so he was a conniving, scheming, ultra violent, but like you could depend on him to go out and blast your enemy, but when he came back, he might blast you as well. So you have to be careful about him. So that was my idea behind Starscream. That he was somebody you couldn't trust, even though he was really good at what he did.
That's really amazing. I couldn't imagine that. That is a really creative thing to do, and as you established before, it is great because you work in a very creative environment with all of the artists and writers. I think that influenced you in terms of creativity.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Speaking of names, another one of my all-time favorite characters, Ratchet, the medic one, the Autobot medic, Ratchet. You named him after Mildred Ratchet from the movie and book One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yes.
And it was with the intention of him being a her. With him being originally the intention was for him to be a female character, but Hasbro didn't allow you. I think it was Hasbro, or I'm not quite sure. But the thing is that they didn't want female toys, which is ironic because we have a lot of them. But what other thing that you wanted to tell or to write or to name Hasbro or whoever didn't allow you to write?
That's a tough one because Hasbro pretty much allowed me to do just about anything I wanted. They liked what I did. So Ratchet, I'm not even sure if Ratchet was the one I wanted to make female. You're probably right, but I knew I wanted to make one character, the token female, which sounds worse. It sounds worse than just making no characters female. If you're going to make one, you may as well make none. Instead of just having a token out there. But back then, that would have been a big deal. So it was explained to me by the account manager that I was dealing with, a product manager who was female herself, that Transformers was a boys' toy. Boys' toys did not have female action figures. Who am I to tell Hasbro how to run their business? So I said, okay, then no female characters. And then 2 years later, they had the movie. They brought out RC. She was a female Transformer. So I guess they broke the glass ceiling or whatever you call it. But in any case, other than that, all the names that I came up with had to be run through legal department. Hasbro had, like any big company, they have a legal department that checks on trademarks and copyrights and all that stuff. So occasionally I would submit a name, and it turned out I wasn't able to use it because somebody else was using it in a similar way. But generally, they loved what I did. They kept coming back to me year after year with, here's a new product line, come up with another 20 or 30 names, and I would do it. So they barely rejected anything I did. One of the things they did reject early on was Megatron. Now, I'm very proud of that name. I think that's my favorite name that I came up with for all the Transformers. And I came up with it that weekend that you referred to way back when, that first weekend I was working on it. And I just thought it had the right sound to it. It had mega, which means big, and back in the 1980s, it meant nuclear bombs, like in megatons, the amount of damage a bomb could do. And Tron was just a standard scientific suffix to add to a word, like Cybertron, Megatron. It just had a nice ring to it. And Hasbro initially rejected it because they said it sounded too scary. And so I understood that Transformers is owned by Hasbro. It's not my toy, it's their toy. And they can make any decision they want. But Megatron was such a good name, I decided I'd fight for it a little bit. So I said to them, I know it sounds scary, but he's the leader of the bad guys. He's supposed to be scary. And then they said, oh yeah, that's a good point. Okay, we'll keep it. they hadn't figured out that the bad guy leader should sound scary. I had to point that out to them. So that's how Megatron made it through the process of being considered. So
actually, Megatron is my favorite Decepticon. So I'm very happy that you fought for the name.
I did it for you, Jack.
Thank you very much.
You knew that one day one guy would make an interview and say that, and you were like,
I have to fight for this name?
Well, you know, Megatron. I've seen Megatron show up in the Doonesbury comic strip like years and years ago, like decades ago. I believe a football player, a National Football League player, used Megatron as his nickname it was on his jersey for several seasons. So, you know, it's a good name. People pick up on it. It's you know has a good a resonance that means something to some people. So I came up with a good name. But overall, like I said, Hasbro was very easy to work with. I don't think they rejected any of my storylines. But I also knew how to work with them because Hasbro, ultimately, they're a toy company trying to sell toys. And although you as a reader might have enjoyed the stories that I wrote, what Hasbro was looking for was for the comic book to sell toys. So Transformers was so successful that they soon started putting out new lines of toys, like 20, 30 at a time, every 6 months or whatever. And I'd have to figure out ways to introduce them into the comic book. So as long as I had that understanding of what their goal was, which is bring in the new toys so they could be promoting their toy sales, they were happy, and I did what I wanted to do. But it did make it very difficult to write that comic book because, as you might imagine, if your cast of characters is constantly changing, it's really hard to create a narrative that's continuous, that it seems like it's organic and flows. And it also was very limited by the initial premise of the Transformers, which is just this little group of Transformers wind up on Earth, and the rest of them are light years away in outer space somewhere on Cybertron. I had to keep finding ways to get around that plot limitation and figure out ways to bring in new characters.
So this question, you answered like another question that I had for you, like which was the name or the profile that you feel like was the most proud of. And now I know that it's Megatron, but this was the other part of the question, the one that you feel like, no, this could have been better, or this could have been another thing, or nah, this didn't work, but I had to deliver it. Which was that profile that you didn't quite like at the
You
end?
know, see, you got to remember, I know to fans, like each character is like a jewel, like a unique gemstone that stands apart. But I was cranking these out, dozens of them. I don't remember the losers, the characters that I barely used because they didn't fit into my storyline or because I didn't care about their name so much. The name didn't have much of a ring to my creative ears or whatever. It's hard for me to say, like so many years later, oh, this character was, was poorly conceived, or I wish I had a different name for it. It's like people asking me, what's your least favorite song? Well, my least favorite song is a song that I forgot. I don't remember it. It's like, who remembers what you don't care about? So I don't remember. I mean, like I said, I created about 250 names, wrote character profiles for even more than that, because I also wrote profiles for some of the characters I didn't create. And I can't remember every character I worked on.
I understand. Yeah, at least if you can remember the good ones, at least you can remember the bad ones. So
exactly, the good ones, the ones that I enjoyed writing into the stories, and those are the ones I have some connection to and I have some memory of. But so many characters appeared for a panel or two and were never seen again.
So you have stated in the past that your job as a Transformers writer was just that, a job. So seeing that a lot of other franchises of the 80s like He-Man or Thundercats, G.I. Joe, they have not passed the time. They have not become like so iconic as Transformers did, because Transformers is now relevant, is now in the mouth of a lot of people. A lot of cartoons are being created, a lot of toys, the toy line continues, a lot of comics are being made based on your profile characters and all of that. And as you said, Megatron is a name that catch on and that define a lot of people. Seeing that, has your opinion about your own work changed over the years, or you still have that same like mindset of, it was fun, it was great, but it was just a job.
Well, I don't know why it should change. I mean, it's work I did 30, 35 years ago. You know, it's like whatever I thought of it back then is still valid today. I don't look back at it and say, well, I mean, I don't look back at it that much, frankly. I look at it when I do interviews like this, or when I go to a Transformers convention and I'm asked questions about it or something. But I don't dwell on it otherwise. So I can't look back at it and say, oh no, what I thought about it while I was doing it was wrong, and that actually this is what I really felt. No, I felt like it was a job, but like so much of comic book work, it was a job I really loved doing, and I did my best job that I could while I was doing it. So that's still true. I understand from speaking to so many fans of my work and fans of Transformers in general over the years, that if you're a fan, you come out looking at the Transformers from a very different way. It's not a job, it's a passion. People who show up at these Transformers conventions don't go there because it's their job. It's because they love the Transformers and all different aspects of it, whether it's the comic books or the animated TV series or the movies or the toys or whatever. They bring their own passion about Transformers to it. And that's completely different than somebody like me who was an adult working on the Transformers. You know, I'm guessing that you were probably a child when you were first exposed to Transformers. I was a child when I was first exposed to Justice League of America #6, you know, which was back in the 60s. So by the time I was working on Transformers, I was well into my adult years. And I just looked at it from a very different point of view.
So to wrap up this interview, I have a little bit of fan questions. One of my subscribers named Skyward, actually, that's his username, Skyward, asked, what was your reaction when you saw the toys for the first time?
I thought they were really cool. You know, I mean, again, I was an adult. I was I was 28 years old at the time. And I thought, like, these are pretty cool toys, you know? I mean, I wasn't going to take them home and play with them, but they were very imaginative. And I could see that they had a lot going for them because you could do a lot of different things with them. You know, they really sparked the imagination because they had a humanoid look when they were in their robot form. So, and then they turned into something completely different, whether it was a car or a jet plane or a gun. Megatron was a gun back then. I think he's been de-gunned over the years or something. So I thought that, you know, it was good. Now, I don't know. I didn't know much about the toy industry, so I didn't know if this was going to go anywhere or not. You know, at the same time that Transformers came to America, Voltron came to America. Very similar property. I was aware that there was these other properties out there that were similar to Transformers. I had no idea that Transformers was going to be this huge hit. You know, decades later, we're still talking about it, and these other similar toys would fade away. I didn't know enough to. I don't even know if Hasbro knew enough to be able to predict it or not. I remember having a meeting with some Hasbro executives where they explained to me that in the toy industry, if a toy makes it past 2 holiday seasons, in other words, when a toy company launches a brand new big deal toy on Transformers, they plan it to come out. They plan it to come out like this time of year, like so that kids can buy it for the holiday season. For the, you know, well, not kids could, but their parents can buy it for the kids. So if it could survive this year and next year and sell a decent amount, they said that's a success in the toy industry if it survives 2 years, 2 holiday seasons. So nobody knew back then that Transformers was going to be an incredible success that would last for years and years, fade away, come back stronger than ever a decade later. You know, I didn't know it, but I just thought, well, when I first saw the toy, I thought, these are cool toys. I don't know if anything will happen with them, but as a writer, I'll give it a try.
No, that's true. Transformers set lasted over 35 years, so I think you all did a great job.
Oh, thank you.
Another question is from my mother. Actually, she was the one that introduced me to Transformers. What do you feel when you see the success that the franchise has had?
What do I feel? Well, I'm glad the Transformers are successful. I'm happy that the work that I did still resonates all these years later, because at the time that I did it, like so many other comic books, I just feel like, well, okay, I wrote it for a few years. It had its run, it had its fans, and then they're forgotten. Most comic books, you don't think they're going to have a life beyond what you did for that moment. But so as far as the success of the Transformers and the things that I added to the Transformers franchise, I'm very happy for it. But I don't have a piece of it, so I don't have like a big emotional stake or financial stake in it. So I don't get that excited about, oh, a new Transformers movie's coming out. I can't wait because I'm going to get $0 from it, like what is it? I got paid for the work I did back then. I got paid for writing all those biographies and naming all those characters, but I don't have a piece of it. I don't have a piece, so I take some pride that my creations, when I say my creations, I only partially created Transformers. I came up with some names and personalities. I didn't design the toys. I didn't come up with the concept. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm the creator of Transformers. I had a small part to play. But so I'm very happy that it's given me kind of a second life in the terms of my comic book career, that I get invited to Transformers conventions and I get invited to these interviews and I get awards occasionally, and like all this stuff that's happened decades after I left the property. Here, I'll show you some. Everything's within arm's reach. See, this is what I got back in 2010.
Well, that was like your trophy for the Hall of Fame, right?
That's it. So like I'm very proud of that. That they recognize my contribution to Transformers. So it's nice. It's nice that you get recognized for your work. I appreciate that. I'm not so greedy that everything is about money. But on the other hand, I don't have a piece of it. So if the studio is putting out a new Transformers movie, it means virtually nothing to me. It doesn't. It's not like I'm going to, be invited to the Hollywood premiere or get a credit on the movie. It doesn't work that way. So.
It was amazing seeing the trophy because it's amazing. It looks great.
Yeah. Well, it's right above my it's on my computer desk. It's always there. Oh, I'll show you something else. Getting off topic. This is right next to the trophy. Somebody sent me this.
Oh my God. That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a wooden bust of Sleepwalker. See?
That's
Isn't that nice?
Actually. I really love it. It's greatly made. So this is a funny question from Jafet Toledo.
Okay.
One of the characters was going to be named High Beam.
Speaking of rejected names, yes.
Yeah. To which character was that name originally intended? So to which character?
Yeah, I think he was one of the original 26, but I don't remember which one. It was definitely an Autobot. Definitely an Autobot that was a car. I don't remember though. I'd have to go back. I probably have my original written notes, but I'll show you something else. Boy, you're so lucky that everything I own is right within arm's reach. But I wrote my original bios for Transformers on these yellow legal pads. So, like this one is, this one became Ravage, for instance. Oops. Okay. Now Ravage is not there; it just says Jaguar. And I came up with the name Stalker, and I guess Stalker was not acceptable for it. Probably didn't pass legal. So that became Ravage, which is a much better name, frankly, in my opinion.
Actually, my cat is named Ravage after the...
Oh, yeah? Hopefully your cat's much nicer.
Kind of.
So probably somewhere among all these legal papers, there's a High Beams, but I don't remember which one High Beams became after rejected. I don't.
I get it.
I have a question for you, though, if you don't mind me interrupting your questions. This is what I was thinking about when you set up this interview. Speaking of names, so I came up with all these names for an English-speaking audience. You know, all of these names are either literal words, like ravage is a literal English word, or they're combinations of Anglo-Saxon type words like lock, like grimlock. You know, grim and lock. It's not a real word by itself, or things like that, or a star screen. You know, how do these names sound to a Spanish-speaking audience? Do they make any sense?
Well, they sound like very cool names. When you look at the translations and all of that, because I didn't know that bumblebee was abejorro. It was a kind of insect in Spanish. So it was confusing for me, but okay, I get it. It makes sense because he's yellow, he's little. I made the connection when I was a little kid, but they sound like very cool names. Not all of the times they get translated. It happened like in the Beast Wars, in the Beast Wars cartoon, or with Ravage himself, because Ravage was named, I think, in Latin America, it was named Destructor, which is destroyer, or,
Destroyer, okay.
or something like that. He was named, or some other names are just translated. For example, Devastator. Devastator is like a very straightforward name. He's just called Devastador. But a lot of them are kept like the same way. Megatron has always been Megatron. Bumblebee has always been Bumblebee. Cliff Jumper has always been Cliff Jumper. So on and so on.
Anyway, you can continue with your questions. I finished with my question. I'm just curious. I'm glad my names, even if you didn't understand them in Spanish, they still sounded cool. At least some of them.
So the last one is from Michigan Gonzalez TV. She tried to reduce it because it's a very long question. She's
Okay.
trying to talk about how did you manage to put the psychology in the characters, because they are not like maybe humans or animals. You can like write a personality for. They are cars. They turn into cars and robots. How did you manage to? She established that you did a very good job at it.
Well, actually, she brings up a pretty good question, or a pretty interesting aspect of the Transformers. At the end of the day, I don't know how that translates to Spanish. It's a colloquialism. At the end of the day, the Transformers are like you and me. Okay, they are these big, enormous robots, but personality-wise, they're not that different than people that we're familiar with. Whether they're people we know from our everyday life, people we know from movies, from books, from television shows. That's where I got their personalities from. I can't think like an alien. I'm not an alien. I don't know aliens. But I have a pretty good exposure to a wide, at least when I was writing these characters, to a very wide universe of fictional and non-fictional characters to draw from. So many of these characters, their personalities might come directly from a character I saw in a movie or a television show, or they might have been a combination of, you know, a couple of aspects of this person, a couple of aspects of that person. I'll push them together and make it a new person and call it, you know, Cliff Jumper or whatever. But if you look, I mean, the only thing that made them alien to the way I wrote them anyway, is that when they're on Earth, they don't understand us. Because we're organic matter. They're inorganic. You know, we have our ways of functioning in our culture, in our society, and that's alien to them. You know, at least parts of it are alien to them. I mean, they still have good guys and bad guys, and people who want to do noble things, and people who want to do tyrannical things. You know, when I say people, I mean Decepticons and Autobots. So, you know, that's something that is a very common sort of concept that we all share all around the world throughout our history. You know, good guys, bad guys, people trying to dominate, people trying to do good things. But when they encounter cultural aspects or social aspects of humans, I tried to put into the story that they didn't quite understand it, and either they wanted to understand it better and get to know people better, or they didn't care about people. they just wanted to do what was on their agenda, or if they were Decepticons, they not only didn't care about people, people got in their way, and they either wanted to conquer them or destroy them or threaten them. So there was a whole spectrum of how they responded to being around us. And that's where the alienness of the Transformers came into the stories that I wrote. And I always say Transformers is a fish out of water story. You bring these giant, powerful robots and you crash land them on Earth, and then you see what happens. So most of my stories, I was always interested in showing how they interacted with us, what kind of friction, what kind of conflict that would create by just interacting with us doing our normal everyday things, whether it was going on a camping trip, going on vacation, going to a rock concert. You know, I put all these everyday situations in there that I thought my readers could relate to. And then all of a sudden a giant transformer shows up and everything goes crazy. So that was my driving motivation in the kind of stories I was writing, to show the differences between us and them. Yet personality-wise, they reflected a lot of human qualities. So that way it made it relatable when my readers read the stories, hopefully, that they could understand and identify these kind of characters.
They are very relatable as well. We're talking about them 35 years after their supposed time. So, an amazing job, and I salute you in the name of all the Costa Rican fans of Transformers, in the name of all the fans of the world. It's truly an honor. So I'm really honored with this opportunity. Thank you very much.
So it's been my pleasure. It's been great talking to you, and I hope your followers on your channel enjoy what I have to say. And it's been fun.
Okay, thank you very much. This has been all. So, anything else that you want to tell to the audience?
Do I have anything else to say to the audience? Is that what you're saying?
You anything that you want to say to the audience?
I wish I knew my Spanish better so I could speak in Spanish. I did take Spanish for a number of years, but it was a long time ago. But anyway, I'm just rather humbled that after all of these years, that so many people still have an interest in the work I did long ago, you know, like decades ago, and still value it and still get something out of it. It's always a pleasure to hear about people who still appreciate what I did back then and still, you know, refer to it even today. And so, you know, I thank you, and I thank all the fans for sticking with me and bringing me back to platforms like this to share my remembrances and my stories. And I hope you learned something today. I did learn a lot. Thank you very much for this. My pleasure. So this is a wrap. As I always say at the end of my videos, nothing more to say but live to maximum, do awesome things, and shine like black diamonds. This has been Black Diamond Ltd. We are your hosts, Jack and Bob. So thank you very much for being here, to all of you. You're welcome. Thank you.